traditional to allow the guest for a short introduction. So if you want to start by introducing yourself, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I'm Lieutenant Lollipop. I've been in the crypto space since about 2013 or so. Really moved to Solana and started working mainly on Solana in about 2020 after I did my first Solana transaction, and it was done basically by the time I changed to a different window. Versus dealing with Ethereum, that would take a half hour or so to get your confirmation. Then got heavily involved when NFTs really started becoming popular about a year later. Heavily involved there, and I started to see some really unique things happening between what was going on with NFTs in Ethereum and NFTs in Solana. And what I found very interesting was, like you had highlighted earlier, you kind of see two main types of DAOs: the protocol DAOs and more the community, the social DAOs. And Solana had a lot more of the more social DAOs, and it was interesting to see how those were developing in different ways. People were trying to establish governance and systems to try to give some type of order, some type of alignment in those groups. I got really interested because as things were developing, you started to see some really unique cultures kind of developing, and you started to see I personally started to see almost all the technical platforms that you were using to establish governance were just bogging down the system and causing things to become more difficult rather than streamlining and making them easier. So I started working a lot more with looking at how we can use social norms, social expectations, really in place of technical framework to try to basically streamline as much as you can and make things as low friction as possible to get any type of action or decision made within DAOs.
I see, and I see your approach. You come from a different school from at least where I come from, which is I look more on the decentralization instead of the organization or efficiency. And I totally see the two schools, and I see pros and cons and why people would...
My background, I've had 10 years in pharma, specifically in quality assurance for a lot of that time, and a lot of it's focused with organizational governance, how you establish basically systems and establish controls to make sure that they're operating consistently. What I found most interesting was looking back at my career after I started working a bit more with social DAOs is I realized a lot of the impacts and changes that I needed to affect in my career, I didn't have necessarily the authority to implement the changes. And so what I was really heavily reliant on was building relationships with different functions and using those relationships to basically impact change and have things occur throughout the organization. And what I found was very similar parallels with DAOs in Solana, because when you had technical governance and a technical framework like tokenized governance or some type of governance weight, what I realized is honestly it really doesn't matter where the tokens are sitting as long as you have the ability to influence how they're being used. And so if I have a close relationship with a friend within one DAO and they have a heavy amount of tokens for governance, and they trust me and I give them guidance or recommendations or suggestions that they tend to follow, it really didn't make a whole lot of difference whether I own those directly or if the people that I collaborated did. And I think kind of from there, that's where I started recognizing that you can't buy every token, you can't buy every governance weight in every platform, but you can build relationships, you can establish a reputation, and with those tools, you then can influence individuals that are aligned in the kind of what you're trying to achieve to have real impacts and changes in the Solana ecosystem.
I see. I'm. Again, this is a very different school. I think it would be easier if we start by defining what do we think is a DAO. What are the necessary ingredients that we need to add in this soup in order to get a DAO? there are some basic ingredients. I'm sure there are some complementary ingredients, but for sure there are some basic ones. I would love to hear your opinion, and I would love to get our DAO friends Takisol and Dean Machine here to give us a little bit of an opinion on what are those ingredients. But I'd like you to start, Lieutenant Lollipop. What do you think is important to have for a group to be called a DAO?
So I kind of see, like I said, there's, I think, two schools of DAOs that you have, and I think they actually have two very different frameworks. I think the first is what we're traditionally used to seeing is more of a technical DAO, platform DAO, protocol DAO, where you have really strict governance, and it's more about achieving a very technical outcome. Things like Marinade, where you're voting on weight of how you're distributing staked SOL for validators, or like Uniswap. They're very straightforward, and it's very structured, almost like a business normally would be. When we look at community DAOs, however, I think we get stuck on this idea that they need to look like a business, like a centralized entity where you have clear structure and clear boundaries within that DAO. But what I realize, what ultimately controls those communities, it comes down to the culture, the reputation, and really the relationships built within those groups. I've seen this specifically like with the Banditos, how after Bonk started taking off and there was a mint for Bonkitos, Solana Bonk business, a group joined together that created the Bonkito DAO, which was just trying to take the culture that the Banditos did and kind of run with it as well. And even though we had zero involvement with setting that up or designing it, it instantly became kind of a partner group that was running things by us. We were kind of working with them, and without having any centralized or structure in place other than that culture, we were able to collaborate and really impact the system. They were building some tools in that, and they came to us for guidance. I helped connect them with some different groups, specifically with loans. And so I think the community DAOs, we need to take a step back and look at it at a higher level and recognize anything can really happen when people are just aligned in the direction they want to take things. You can have a governance vote in the community DAO, but the moment social sentiment changes away from that, that no longer holds any weight. This happened exactly actually with the Monkey DAO, where they passed a governance proposal that they wanted to operate like a business, and they wanted to have a lot more structure on how they were going to, what they expected from elected officials. I came in and I actually put my name nominated a nomination to be elected, and I ran on a platform very clearly that I was not going to abide by what the governance vote was. That I believe that we needed to focus more on culture and building subcultures within that group. And I was told, no, you got to follow what was agreed to. And my opinion was, okay, if they feel that governance vote still carries weight, then guess what? I'm not going to get voted in. I'm not going to, if they still agree with it, then I'm not going to get elected. I ended up stepping down before final votes occurred, but I ended up getting the most votes there. And I think that just goes to show when you're looking at community groups where it's not a protocol with very strict technical framework, social sentiment and social opinion ultimately rules what is reality in those groups.
I will condense your answer to most important thing is common culture. And nothing programmatic, no rigid rule sets, and no on-chain requirement, no requirement for a ledger. Like in your answer, I heard extremely important requirements for a DAO, which I totally agree. But in my recipe, in my book, it would for sure contain more ingredients. But from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, culture is your number one ingredient.
Culture, because from culture comes social norms.
What do you think?
And that's how we always have accountable and establish technical rules without having it in any type of logical framework, like a protocol.
Can I hear opinions from Mr. Dean Machine, and after Dean Machine, Mr. Takisol? I think it's an important subject.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would do a follow-up question. As I always like to think about why have DAOs come onto the scene? Like, why is it that, we didn't discuss these, pre-Bitcoin, pre-blockchain? Do you think that, there was, like, there's definitely more discussion about these kind of organizations than there was before blockchain?
I think NFTs actually sparked the majority of the community groups because what it did is it gave people a shared identity, a common identity. When Solana Monkey Business is a great example. When they minted 5,000 NFTs, a bunch of people that had no real most people didn't know each other, but all of a sudden they now had a common interest, a common cause. They wanted to help build that group. And once the initial, I think, 12 guys set up Monkey DAO, there was kind of that starting framework of some type of group that people identified with and people wanted to join, that they wanted to build from there. And I think NFTs really just created that sense of common identity to spark what we're starting to see with all these more social DAOs and really spark those cultures to start developing. I don't think, honestly, that we may even need that
I mean,
anymore because we pulled more people together.
we had collectibles before that. We had Magic the Gathering cards and
Yeah, I
stickers,
think common
you
cultures.
know.
Exactly. I was going to say the same. You also had World of Warcraft, right? That had, but like you can even go before that. You can have sports teams, for example, right? Like,
No, but the difficulty there is that you usually only had it on one special interest. You did not have cross-functional where you would basically see the same people in multiple different groups. And I think that's really the big difference from what you see. I did used to do a lot of online gaming, World of Warcraft and that, but you really were just doing it for
There
that
is a
event.
there is a sense of belonging.
But you also
There is a
cycle
sense
through
of
these things.
belonging that you're going to interact in.
But a good example is like Gaius, if you're familiar with him. I didn't know him initially all too well. I knew of him. I knew he was popular. But what started happening is I started going into different projects, and the same projects that I was going into, I started consistently seeing him. He started consistently seeing me. And kind of from there, we started getting more intrigued about each other and talking and building more of those relationships. I think those are the elements that you're missing when you're looking at the Web 2 types of communities because you didn't really get much crossover. If you, say you had a favorite sports team and let's say you also had special interest in, let's say, hiking and you were really active on a subreddit for hiking and name off a few different hobbies. The issue is you never really had too much crossover where you're seeing the same consistent people. And so I think that cycling between those things and seeing the same people because we were all on Solana, there was a limited number of different communities and groups that we could be a part of. We started then to create greater relationships amongst people.
yeah, I want to make sure I'm understanding. It's that in NFTs, there's a greater bond, as a closer bond than in like the sports teams.
I think you're able to build stronger relationships when you're going across different groups and activities. If you have, let's say, a favorite sports team, yes, that might be a lot of your time, but that's probably not where you're spending, let's say, 90% of your day. Versus when you're really interacting, if you're spending a lot of time in crypto in general, because that's your interest and hobby, you may be going between multiple different projects or like discords. I mean, during the peak of it, I would be going between 10 to 15 discords daily, and I would be spending probably a good 5-6 hours there. So the sheer rate of the number of people that you saw between those groups, I think it created a unique situation that allowed people to build stronger bonds and then also bond over a common culture that may carry over from one group to another.
Yeah, look, I think that, I can agree to disagree. When I'm thinking about, like, again, I'm going to use sports as a very specific analogy. There you've got the tailgating culture. You've got people who spend, their physical lives with each other, and they're spending, hours and hours on that same content, but they're also meeting up and then traveling together to go watch that team. These cultures are huge too. Like, I was just watching the Steph Curry documentary on Apple, and looking at the Davidson University where he was playing when he was in college. Like, I never heard of that college, but like that culture. There was a Davidson newspaper writing about him, and then he was on the TV show. Like, I think there are examples of cultures, and we happen to be very deep into the ones we're into and might not know about the other ones. But I think it's a very good point that you say that, like, you cross multiple discords, and it speaks to the importance of the culture.
I want to add another layer on this, which I totally agree with Lollipop here that this kind of relationship, which kind of bonds people because they're both like following the same underlying culture, which is going to lead them at the same event, same Discord, same kind of financial decisions, risk taking, same emotions, same kind of journeys is strong. And I understand how these people are going to start talking and going to start coordinating in order to achieve something new, maybe culturally, maybe spread their culture, maybe organize an event around this cultural phenomenon or whatever they're pushing. But how do you start? How are you going to efficiently organize once the culture exceeds a number of people? Once you get above the Dunbar number of 150 or 100 people that know each other and everyone trusts everyone, and it's easy to decide if you don't have a ledger, shouldn't this be scalable? Shouldn't be DAOs infinitely scalable, at least at a very base level?
I don't think you're ever going to get something to that level of scalability because, I mean, think of any culture, any group that people align behind. Chances are people cycle through different interests. They're never going to stay hyper-fixated on just one group for the most part consistently. I mean, look at how, like we talked about, MMORPGs build culture, build groups, but I mean, how many people still are playing World of Warcraft? They might be moving on to other games or doing other things. So I think there is going to always be an inherent difficulty in scaling any of these because it's always going to be a revolving door. And the question is you're going to only be able to scale it up as much as you can keep people in the door engaged and interested. And I think ultimately, with the passage of time, you're always going to have bumps and people are always going to eventually move on or just lower their activity in that group for something new, something interesting. So I think going back to how I was highlighting social DAOs as kind of more of a culture, I don't even think that necessarily is confined within one Discord or within one project. I think those type of structures are kind of restrictive, and rather the culture is amongst different people that then are going collaboratively across different projects and groups. I've developed a strong group of individuals that I work with governance. We got kind of aligned with FRAC and then moved on with Hades, and we're supporting several other projects. But the thing is not everyone supports the same thing. It's not like one cohesive group where everyone's moving in the same direction. Rather, it's more like a cloud, a mesh of different interactions and different groups. You may be working with some people in one community, but not another. But maybe 6 months from now,
But how do you reach consensus?
Well, that depends on what they're trying to achieve.
How do you reach consensus? And
in this particular setting that you're describing, Lieutenant Lollipop, how is governance practiced? How can we have an effective governance practice through the groups that you're describing? What's the best solution that applies here?
The key there is going to be reputation, because that's really the only thing that's going to force someone to really follow what's the culture identifies as the social norms or what's considered acceptable. An example of that is, as you know, I do tend to cause some havoc in some of the projects I go to, and sometimes I may be pushing the boundaries a bit too much where I might be causing damage to other people's investments. And so when I was in Acme Marinade and I started really going after them because they were pushing back on Affinity, I actually had Gaius pull me to the side and say, hey, dude, I need you to settle down a bit or calm down. And most people, I'm just going to tell them to F off. But someone like Gaius, who I built a relationship with, that I did not want to piss him off, and I recognize I do make mistakes. I do need other people to sometimes keep me in check, but it's a question of who I allow in to influence me and make those changes. So I think it's a lot looser in how that's done, but it really comes down to reputation, not wanting to destroy my reputation amongst people I care about.
So how is that reputation being established for both for new members and both for old members? Let's say for older members that have been here since day one, they know who is who, but then a newcomer comes, and how do they know, how they can tell what's the reputation for each member in the community? How can you know to which person you are having a conversation within the whatever venue of the DAO, let's say, of this organization? How do we solve this?
I think it's a really difficult thing because it comes down to just being subjective based on the two individuals that are interacting and how they view each other. This is my issue with any type of social reputation system where you're trying to distill it down to numbers. I always like to use the example of, let's say you do have some type of reputation system that's quantitative and everyone has a different score. But let's say one of the guys in your group ends up fucking your girlfriend. Now, they might get dinged a little bit on that score, but ultimately, it's not going to impact the vast majority of people in the DAO, and they may not really care. But the person who fucked your girlfriend, you're going to be pissed, and you're going to lose all reputation between those two individuals. And I think that's the difficulty that you have, is when you have new people coming in, it's going to be hard to identify who really has those strong reputation, but you got to kind of have to build it on your own. It's why I've never wanted to join like the Boogles or that, is because the people that are actually in those groups that I care about, that I think have value, I've built relationships with them. I didn't need an NFT or a group to do that because there was mutual benefit in us collaborating or building those type of relationships.
Okay, I see. In my personal opinion, I think we still need some type of ledger to record every decision making in the community, especially where there's a treasury involved and funds that need to move. For, let's say, in the previous example of the sports team that needs to travel for a game to another town. So we need to be able to have a ledger for where we prove that the whole community agreed, or at least the majority of the community.
I would challenge that, because I don't even think you necessarily need a treasury for the community. I don't think that operations is anything that's strong with any of these communities, because A, it's a revolving door, and you're limited then to having people perform operations that are within that group. Usually what I've seen happen is you get one or two people that just feel obligated, and they kind of get stuck with doing the work while everyone else is just kind of generally benefiting from their work. What I think the best use of these communities rather is for alignment and for governance votes on other technical platforms. So I don't think you need to have a treasury to do that. I think you just need people aligned. Let's say they want to impact Marinade. Well, having a group in the DAO and people buying on their own governance weight in Marinade, and them coming together to align on how they want to use that collectively on their own to then impact changes and influence those technical DAOs, those platform protocol DAOs. I think that's where you see the big difference is those protocol DAOs is where you need that structure, where you need that the treasury and everything more formalized. But when you're talking these communities, I think it's more about how you get people to align and then influence those more technical systems collectively through culture and alignment.
It's really hard to measure success like that. Like, maybe we are all promising, I pinky promise that I will pull my liquidity from Marinade because I do not agree with how they are dealing with Lifinity and the rewards to the Lifinity team. But yeah, I will not do it. I might say I'll do it. I pinky promise I will pull liquidity, but I really enjoy my MSOL, and since they are already in a lending contract, I can't bother. But I'm with you guys. So there is no way to really check on that. You might have some social consensus, but it's not really verifiable. And the name of the game here is don't trust, verify. The whole idea behind DAOs is, hey, we're a group of people, we don't trust each other, I don't know you, I've never seen you, but I know and I can prove that we have a common cause. And which means anything that I think is best for me is best for the group. So you get this alignment of incentives programmatically.
Yeah, well, I'd like to challenge that, because if someone doesn't, let's say we agree that we're going to pull liquidity from Marinade or something, you're going to be able to see how people are voting. And if someone chooses not to say they're going to do one thing and then they don't do it, you're not going to be able to change a whole lot with Marinade or that specific group. But like I was saying earlier, you're usually working with these people across different platforms and different other systems. So when it comes to another decision down the road, and that person comes in, you're going to have a different opinion. That person's going to have lost reputation with you because
But you don't know. But you don't know if I did. I said I did, but you don't know if I actually did or not, because it's not recorded anywhere. Like I have 9 wallets with Solana inside. I told you only about one, and I left the other 8. So there's you don't know if I'm true to my word or not if there's no ledger. So when you see me on the next server, I carry good reputation, positive reputation, because you think I pulled my Marinade liquidity as agreed, but there's no proof.
I don't think I've really come to too many situations like that, because usually when I've coordinated with governance activities like on Hades, usually when we come to agree to something, you can see who's putting votes where. And yes, I may not know exactly who's doing what, who's at which wallet, but I have usually a vague idea, or I usually ask, hey, was this you putting this vote here? And because I tend to know the individuals that I'm collaborating with, I'm not saying it's a perfect system, but 70-30 working. I think this is where you come down to
you might be really good at evaluating social connections and evaluating people through Discord chats. There are people that are much better in that. If you told me you played lots of World of Warcraft. I also did lots of raid leading, lots of 15 years of EU top 100 clears. It was not a DAO, it was a dictatorship under my command. There was no voting and bullshit, because as you said, it's a rotating door and I have a cause, and it's a dictatorship. But that made me extremely good at evaluating people through chats and voice comms and whatever we were using back then. Not everybody has this kind of ability.
But you can also be
and having a ledger solves this.
You can also be proactive with it, though. And this, if you see how I operate on like Twitter, and when I'm trying to build more followers, I tend to do some wild event where I get a lot of people to follow me, but then I tend to take very hard stances that upset a lot of people. Like a good example is when I burned Ice Knife's Monkey, I got a huge number of followers, and then I started attacking Frank and going off on people on that side. What that ended up doing is it caused people who didn't agree with my sentiment on how I was approaching it to stop following me or mute me or block me. And what I was able to do through doing that repeatedly through different cycles is building a following of just people who have general alignment with what your cause is, what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do. I don't want middle of the road people, because as you said, I don't want anyone pushing back. If I want to achieve something and I want people to follow me, I'm going to be very forward with, and I want to get the most number of people to align right behind it. I don't want to have a conversation because I know what I want to do. I think that's one way to achieve it without having to ever evaluate.
So DAOs need leaders. That's what you're telling me. DAOs need strong leaders. Because not everybody has the ability of what you did. And I'm not talking about money here. I'm talking about buying iced NFT and burning it live on everybody, and then doing it again on other communities. This is something you made. This is you. You can't expect everybody to be able to do such kind of like brilliant move.
And that's what I see as actually a community of social.
Like we need a system that works for everybody.
Well, it's about, I think, building a following through some means and getting people to listen and align behind it. If I can make a post about wanting to affect a certain governance vote on Marinade or on Uniswap or wherever, and I can actually get enough people behind me because of my followers to agree and vote that way, I mean, that's no different than having your own project with a token-gated Discord and telling people and trying to collaborate and coordinate through there. How you coordinate, I don't think matters. It just matters of how are you able to get people to align behind you and follow through to create actual impact on other governance votes. Basically being a cult leader.
I mean, this comes down to integrity, you know, integrity farms. Once again, comes down to Randy Marsh, because at some point there's going to be some clash in incentives. There's going to be some kind of conflict of interest, and there is no way to ensure that it is going to be avoided. At some point, there's going to be a bottleneck where someone needs to hold an insane amount of money, value, importance, whatever is that, and he will not be able to get to check on him. Like I'm always thinking about worst case scenarios when it comes to these kind of groups, and I think it works in good case scenarios what you're describing, but in worst case scenarios, man,
well,
let's
take an example. Let's say I could get a lot of people to follow me and I build a reputation, and from that it's usually I have a sense of values and what I'm trying to achieve that people agree with. Now, if I exploit that at some point and I have people vote a certain way and my intentions were not aligned with that, what's going to happen is I'm going to lose reputation. I'm going to lose followers. People are not going to trust me. They're not going to follow me like they did before. And I would lose the majority of power I had then to impact other governance systems. So yes, it's not something you can prevent it from happening, but once it does happen, people reevaluate and it's going to deteriorate their ability to do it moving forward.
We've gone very philosophical. Dean Machine, Takisol, help us out.
Yeah, no, I love it, you know, and I want to kind of bring it back a bit to like blockchain discussions, right? Like, do you think like, is there outside of like from an investment standpoint, like your bags are all on Solana, for example, let's say, like, do you think the best place to build DAOs on blockchains? Not saying that DAOs need to be on blockchains or need that technology, but if you had to, just keeping the design space and the discussion there, is there a reason why it should be Solana over another one, or it's all equal
what
across all?
What I found with Solana, and I can't really say I haven't been on Ethereum DAOs much over the past, I'd say, year or so. So this could be outdated information. But what I've seen in general, the big difference between DAOs on Ethereum and DAOs on Solana is people tend to be a lot more connected and focused on building relationships and culture on Solana. And a lot of it's because people don't have a ton of money. There aren't as many huge whales. And there are people that are coming on that are trying to make a name for themselves. So they're trying to build connections, build networks, build things. I think the gas prices and the level of how much money it was that whales had on Ethereum made it very less of an incentive to do it there. And so just what I saw in general was people were not as connected or focused on building those relationships, which really is what causes that reputation to develop on Ethereum. And I saw it predominantly on Solana when I actually did do a lot on Near when Near was starting to become popular, and it carried over. I saw a lot of similar approaches and groups kind of forming, but that didn't last. Solana, it has kind of lasted. And you can see just through crypto Twitter how bigger names are known and how much they still are active even in a bear market on Solana. So I'm not going to say it's impossible for any other group too. I just think Solana had the head start that Ethereum didn't, because people didn't have much of an option. They tried to collaborate and build more relationships early on.
Okay, I'm hearing the people created it, and I think the people that were attracted to create communities were able to flourish on the chain where these transactions don't cost an arm and a leg, because they're non-financial transactions.
Yeah, people were able to take more risks. They were able to do more. They weren't as limited, and you can be a part of many different communities. It wasn't like minting on Ethereum where you had gas wars. You needed to put up a few Ethereum to even get your mint to go through. Otherwise, you're buying on secondary market for 2, 3, 4 times the amount. People were still able to get lucky and mint at the real price, and then try to use that as their in to build some value by building up that project with other people, and thereby building relationships.
Okay, so from a tooling perspective, like, hey, at the base layer, Solana is cheaper. That's all that matters. That's a better place for us to do governance and community stuff. From a tooling perspective, it doesn't sound like. Is there anything? Do you think there's something missing? Because
I don't think it even comes down to cost of performing things on a blockchain. So it comes down to the time it takes people to perform certain activities. So a good example is using a poll in a Discord versus using on-chain governance. If you have a lot of trust in your group and people aligned, a vote in a Discord can give you the same outcome as on-chain governance will. It's just not going to be immutable. It is open to some exploitation and risks. However, the trade-off there is when you put something as on-chain governance, now you're adding multiple different steps that people have to go in and do. Some people may not be as technically savvy. They may not be they may have to learn how to use some of these toolings, or even just taking a few steps. If you put a post, let's say in a Discord, if you have a Discord poll and someone just can read it, click yes or no, versus having a link to, let's say, a Tribeca or a Realms or wherever, where they have to go in, they have to connect their wallet, they have to navigate to the right proposal, they then have to submit their votes and then verify it's been submitted. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a whole ton, even if you make it easier, but one step of clicking yes or no on a poll versus having to do multiple steps to go in and vote on chain, you're going to cost some people just to move on. And that's usually going to be your people that are a bit less engaged, or they may be a part of multiple communities where they just don't have necessarily the time, or they're prioritizing their time.
Yeah, a lot of this comes down to how much time and money, like a lot of it's money related.
Yeah, it's like guys like Diet, so Big Brain. They had to hire people because they couldn't manage the number of communities and projects they were buying into. And I think that's the scalability issue. Is a lot of people, they won't be able to hire assistants. And that's been one of my goals from the very beginning. Is the only way I want to operate in this space is as an individual. If I'm having to do something where it's too much time and I need to hire an assistant, I'm doing it wrong, and I need to change how I'm approaching it.
Well, you're no longer a DAO member at that point. You're an investor. And I think, I want to go back to the Discord polling. It sounds like, and this is, do you think like Uniswap could have votes go on Discord?
No, I don't think when you're looking at things that have high dollar value, no. I mean, it's the difference between a community and a protocol DAO.
Yeah, I think we're very aligned on a lot of this, which is like, look, we can trust each other when the stakes aren't really high, right? Like, hey, who cares about the decentralization tooling? Like, the value isn't there. The incentive isn't there for somebody to cheat, so we can trust each other. But the moment, like, there must be this like, okay, oh shit, now that the dollar amount is this high, I don't want to have to trust you. I'd like us to use a
Yeah, and I
trustless
think when
system.
you're looking at communities, the terms are even different because the whole point of the poll isn't to get the exact number of how many people are voting yes and how many are voting no. If I had, and this is something that happened in the Banditos multiple times, where we would put governance polls in, and if I had only 70% of people voting yes and 30% of people voting no on something, unless it was absolutely critical to move forward with, I usually push back and we wouldn't move forward with it. I mean, we really only operated if we had near unanimous alignment, because ultimately by doing something that 30% of your group doesn't agree with, you're basically putting them on the spot. They may not be as interested to collaborate or work with you moving forward because you have different interests. A lot of things if the culture is aligned, you're going to have aligned votes 99% of the time, because what's happening is people will be like a revolving door, and those who are aligned with your group, they're going to stick around, and in general, it's going to be like minds voting the same way. And when people disagree, they'll likely move on. But when you have things very contentious, even 30%, I wouldn't want to pick off 30% of my DAO.
I'd like to pose a possible scenario that, let's say in that example community, we have a poll on Discord that is about to decide whether we pay X amount of dollars to devs, to server costs, to the Discord boosts that we have to maintain, our Twitter Blue, trivial stuff, not like big dollar amounts. And that Discord poll is unanimously yes, but someone needs to do it. A team member needs to go and pay for Twitter Blue. They need to go and renew the servers and stuff like that, but they don't do it. What does the community do in that case?
Well, I'll give you, an exact example like that is the Bandito validator. We have never used the governance vote for it. Me, along with J5, fronted the initial cost for a year of hardware. We then pulled people together and we're using Blaze Stake to do liquid staking through squads. And Henko, who was running the server previously, but he ran into some financial issues, so he couldn't maintain it. He's been keeping us updated and keeping it running smoothly. So what's happening is, instead of looking at it like an operations, like a business, the culture is, we've got people who care a lot about the culture in the group, and they're willing to front the money themselves to keep everything going, knowing that that's what the group wants to do, and people are supporting where they're able to. There are some people that are going to have more funding than others, and if they care and want to spend a lot of their time in that group and keep it going, they are more likely to donate to keep those things going. So and this goes back to that looser social framework. We didn't need a governance vote to dictate any of that. If things lapse, which there has been times our servers haven't updated, we've got each other's back and we go, hey guys, this is what's happening. We need to, let's say, top up this wallet, or we need to get this updated. And as long as people are active and engaged, we've never had an issue keeping it going.
So it's all about how tight knit the group is, and how they believe in each other, and there's a camaraderie among them, and they jump into fire to solve the problem.
Yeah, and if they can, and if you don't have that much enough support to get that going, then I think you really need to relook at, is your culture, is your group, is it really working the way that as intended? I mean, people are not active, they're not engaged, they don't care as much about making sure those things are going. So chances are it's not going to survive.
How long has the Bandito DAO been going?
It was a month after the mint, so it was August of 2021. And there's been a lot of cycling of members.
And have you managed to...
Sorry.
Have you managed to keep activity and the culture going, and everybody to be everybody who's active to be engaged?
Yes, but I will say it waxes and wanes. There's going to be times where people are more engaged, or like with the recent SMB Gen 3 mint, we had an influx of new people with Gen 3 sombreros that we gave access to the Bandito DAO as well. That spurred a bit more activity. But I think it goes along with the market conditions. Sometimes you'll have a lot more people engaged and amped up. Our floor price at one point was 700 Sol, but that was during really the peaks of the NFT cycle. And as that's gone down, our floor price is still, I think, double, if not more, of the normal SMB Gen 2 floors. But I mean, activity is lower than it was then up until that Gen 3 mint. Now I think activity people are coming together and they want to help support it and build it out. I've been actually less active this past month or so, but other people have jumped in and they've been, I mean, keeping it going quite a bit.
What is Bandito DAO at the moment working for culturally? What's the direction that Bandito DAO is looking at?
Really, I mean, there's a lot of different schools of thought on it. Personally, I think it should just be focused on culture. I don't think there should be operational costs or expenses. I think the validator was a low effort thing that we could do to help contribute to Solana, to the security of the network. And that, it's something I think we're able to maintain. But I personally do not think it's a good avenue to try to build out any type of business or revenue generating system. I think it's more about making sure you have people that support each other, that there's places they can go with consistent social activity, and when they want to do something or impact something in the ecosystem, they've got people they can talk to about it and get some interest or support through.
I dig that, man. I like that. And I think that's really fair, right? It's like, at the end of the day, I want a cool club, like, I'm online all day. I want to talk with people that I found commonality with, and having that sombrero is like, it made it happen. It made that magic. It could only happen in that way.
Exactly. And when you want to impact change, you can. There was the Monkey DAO was complaining about funding before the Gen 3 mint happened and before they had the IP. Banditos came together and we started doing a collection. I think we raised over 1,500 Sol for Monkey DAO that we just gave directly to them. And it's one of those things that if people care, if they're interested, everyone can contribute in their own way. And that was, I think, one way we can come together and support each other when we realize we're aligned on a cause or an issue.
I'm bummed out because I have a pirate hat instead of a sombrero and I can't join your club. And this is I blame my luck, because I would vibe well with the club and I would want to pull Marinade's liquidity when that day happened. And I don't have a fighting sombrero, I have a pirate's hat.
You had the choice though. You chose to purchase the pirate hat.
No, I minted.
But that just goes to show that
I didn't mint the pirate hat, I bought the pirate hat.
But that is that desire to be included. When you have
I minted a really shitty monkey.
But when you have that drive, people wanting to join, wanting to help expand it, that's when you really have that increase in activity and people willing to, try different things. Or it's unique. It's not like what you would expect from if you were to mint and start to run your own project. It's much less efficient. It's hit and miss at times, but you don't need it to hit every time. I mean, most of the world is built on the 80-20 rule, and it's kind of the same thing there.
Lollipop, if right now there's a DAO waiting for you, is it waiting for you to make it or for you to discover it?
Expand on that. What do you mean? Hang on.
So, I assume you're going to keep on joining new DAOs. My question, though, is it going to be one that you're making, or is it going to be one that you haven't discovered yet?
I do not want to lead any project. So I will never create really my own DAO because, quite honestly, I see my reputation in the network that I have as my DAO. I don't need a project. I don't need funding for a mint or anything like that. So where I go, really, my DAO then goes. So I just look at, I want to be a user. I want to basically live in this space, work through it, not be someone that's where I lock myself down into one structure and say, this is me, this is what I'm building. I don't have that ego. I don't care. People like what I'm doing, great. If they don't, that's fine too.
So what are the qualities in the DAO? Like, we want to help you find that DAO. We spend all of our time on DAOs.
Or all our adult life.
All right, yeah, right. Become it. My kid walks in every time he sees Realms. He's like, "Oh, it's a DAO vote." I'm like, and he's 6. It's like he doesn't even. Anyway,
it's highly dependent on what I feel I need at the time. Yeah. So I go through cycles of burnout or anxiety at times. I'm actually going through some cycle of anxiety currently where it's difficult for me to sometimes even jump on Twitter. If you saw this past, I went on vacation, and when I came back, I just haven't jumped really back onto too much just yet. What I found is there's times that I want to get engaged, I want to do something, and I seek out groups, projects, DAOs that are aligned with that, or sometimes I'm just looking for somewhere to vibe. The reason I joined Near was it was at a time after my burning and everything that was before that. I was doing a lot of work with different groups and governance, even with the Banditos, and I started getting kind of burnt out doing it. And people had expectations from me. Still, when I was trying to figure out how to do governance, I was really focused on getting the right governance model, drafting out guidelines, drafting out mission, values, all these other things, and trying to add structure. And I was burning out. And so I went to Near because I just want to fuck around and have fun. And so I joined a project, the Antisocial Ape Club, where it was just a culture of being a degen, fucking around, saying somewhat offensive stuff, and just kind of having fun. It was just about enjoying that time. I needed that at that time. If you would have came to me with the perfect technical guide for governance on how to basically influence a large aspect of the ecosystem, I probably would say, okay, that's cool. And I didn't have it in me at that time. Well, after recharging for a while, I then started building up Spectrals on Near, which was focused on trying to create a from basically the start, trying to pull all different project owners together and create almost an initial network as that blockchain was scaling to see, now that we knew what happened on Solana and how Solana was operating, what if on a new chain we started where instead of each project owner doing their own thing, what if they were collaborating together? What if they were in a central group that could influence each other and impact change? And so I took that, I started building up a ton of stuff with that group. So it really comes down to, what am I feeling at that time? What do I feel I need? What am I interested in? And I got ADHD, so I'm going to change my mind and jump from thing to thing. I've done that multiple times. If you saw, I was posting with DAP Boys a lot recently because, again, it was just, I was looking for just a fun culture, degen culture to just spend my time on, in addition to supporting other groups like the Banditos and I have a small private group where we're really focused on governance and that. So it really just depends on what I'm feeling, and it's going to change.
I appreciate that, man. Like it's a different lens, and I think that what I love about it is it's so authentic.
A different school,
it's like,
completely.
I want to vibe, man. I don't give a shit. I want to vibe. That's it.
If you've seen, this is why I started doing on Wednesdays. I've been doing mental health and wellness groups with Coach and Toby. Really, what it comes down to, and what.
Oh yeah,
it comes down to being authentic. I want to be as honest and open of a person because that is how you will build trust and reputation. Because when you're just authentically yourself and you operate under that consistently, you don't have to really strategize how you're going to respond to something, because people are going to know who you are from that reputation, and there shouldn't be really any surprises when you go to do something. It's why I can do some really things that may look like you're taking over a protocol, and most people would be like, when I was going after Hades, may cause you to be a bit concerned, or when I start attacking certain people. But because of the reputation I built and because of people who know me, they know I'm doing it for some reason. And because I built a reputation with them, they trust me enough to let me do my thing, because it tends to have a solid understanding and reason. It's just they may not know it right then and there. So I try to be as authentic as I can. And then where I see all of these things growing is, again, it's going from culture and everything. I think what's going to keep people here, I think right now it's still focused on money, but I think what's going to keep people here the longest is going to be the amount of support we can give each other on a more human and emotional level. I don't think Web3 is an economic system. I think it's a social system. And I think people, especially guys, they don't have a network, and we've been kind of told for the majority of our life that it's a competition, we're on our own, and most guys, especially as they get older, don't have someone they can confide in. They feel isolated, alone. Web3 changes that entirely. And you can go from place to community to community to community until you find people you vibe with, find people that you align with. I think right now the difficulty is guys still are guarded. We don't want to trust others. We don't want to be vulnerable. But I think as people start realizing that being authentic, being vulnerable, being honest with who you are is going to build more trust, build more relationships. And from that, everything I've been talking about earlier, you're able to then scale that system more.
I want to explore the scaling part, because I think it's a good mission to say, let's bring people together. What the scaling part, I think, is where a lot of the decentralization and tooling becomes important. And I think I've learned a lot from this conversation, in that the base layer is what we're all working on right now, and you've seen it a lot faster than most. Yep. Which is, hey, we got a vibe. We need to get along. We need to want to hang out. Who cares about some of this other stuff that gets up so much further, like DAO to DAO transactions for assets. It's like, wait 1 second. I don't even like this guy next to me.
Well, that's been,
who cares?
On the scale up, what do you think about network states? Is that in your, do you see that one day you would be
what I
part
see,
of a network
so
state?
we built a society. We've already built society up to this point, not in Web3. And what we've done is we've been limited by the physical world. And so we built systems, we built businesses, we built everything off of your physical location. You were limited to having a support group or friends based on where you were physically. Now, we had advancements in technology that allowed you to start traveling more and other things. But all of our foundational systems are built on location. So our legal system is based on jurisdiction. Our businesses are all built off of legal frameworks for that reason, because you are limited to who was able to actually work at your business. They need to be someone that would apply, and chances are it wasn't someone that you were good, close friends with that you can trust. So you needed certain protections in place. When we look at Web3 and we remove the physical world from the equation, the question is what pulls us together? What puts some type of boundary that is going to bring someone together? And I think that's why I go back to culture and building those interpersonal relationships. When I can cycle through a number of people and build a network of close friends, all that are competent, capable, and have different skill sets. Now, I don't need to have a business where I need to have people aligned or people in a specific role that's really structured with certain amounts of pay. Rather, I just need to build some type of system where those people can contribute to a common cause. Now, again, like everything I've been saying, it's a lot more inconsistent, and you're not going to be able to build something as rigid as a business normally is, but you're going to be able to achieve similar outcomes. You can build a protocol, a tool without a business framework if you have a group of people that are aligned and contributing to it. I mean, we see open source and different ways that people have crowdsourced activities and things before. So I think what scaling is going to look like is going to be based on how you form that sense of identity with other people. And it's going to be fractionalized, I think, as well, because we look at everything from a business running different things. But when we I think that's based on our legal framework is we need a corporation or a group, and we view a DAO kind of as a corporation or a group that we're going to have different arms under. But there's nothing saying that that's the way we have to scale. Rather, if we make it simpler, if we look at it as at a process level, and you start operating governance instead of at a DAO that's doing multiple different arms, rather, you have independent groups that operate governance on a process level that are aligned under a common culture or identity, then you don't need the same interlinks that you would see with having like sub-DAOs that are connected with funding and treasuries and other things. You can have certain DAOs operating, let's say, on one protocol like Marinade, another one operating on Hades, and another one operating on whatever protocol. And if you need to collaborate and you want to pull those utilities together to achieve some type of cause, you then leverage that culture and that community basically to come together and say, this is what we want to achieve. We can do it if we vote this way on this protocol, vote this way on this protocol, vote this way on this protocol, and you can achieve some type of outcome. Again, you're not going to have consistency. It's not going to look like a normal business. But again, I just see this world as a different type of society. And it's going to have positives and negatives. It's going to have things that's going to do well and things that's not going to do well. And we need to play to those strengths and weaknesses.
So can I pose one last question? So in that ultimate vibes DAO, the group of people that vibe together the most, the perfect blend of people that you can find, or any of us can find, that vibe in the best way possible. First of all, is this also on Solana? Will that be on Solana? And what is its final form? The best.
It's going to be a lot more nebulous than what we're used to seeing, because ultimately, when you align multiple different people with reputations and their own network, you can leverage those together, because we kind of steer reputation when we're working with other people because we vouch for other people. So let's say I built up a network of a lot of different people in Solana. Well, I don't know everyone, or I'm not close to everyone, but people that I am close to may be close to other people that may have governance weight in certain protocols, or they may have certain connections or things that if we want to achieve something, that person may be able to tap someone else on the shoulder and convince them to join the cause as well and help support it. So what you're doing is almost creating a network effect where when you can get that common agreement, that alignment within that group, it can spread much further than what you would have within the confines of a normal business or a tokenized Discord or a token-gated Discord. And so I think it becomes a lot more nebulous because there isn't a final form, because what it's going to look like is going to be dependent on the time frame that's being looked at and whatever they're trying to achieve. Because the moment people no longer align or they aren't as interested in achieving a different goal, they may not support it. And so then it's going to look different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it kind of does. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway for this conversation, and thank you for that, for sharing your thoughts with us here tonight, is the importance of vibes and the importance of being in the right group of people that surround you, and the importance of pursuing a vision the way you see fit, even without others realizing it at the moment that what you're doing is you're doing it for a reason. So yeah, I think that's,
and recognize
there's a lot of meat there.
Sorry.
And that's
I think it's also recognizing
I also learned a lot from
Sorry, I think it's recognizing that that there's going to be it's not just about building a structure and having it endure the test of time. It's about recognizing that there's going to be times that you're going to get support and there's times that you're not going to get support. So the structure, the impact, what you're capable of doing is going to change over time. And I think this is where legal structures really hinder groups, is because they want to have control over certain operations consistently, so they build them in-house, versus if you're using tools like technical platform or protocols, and you're leveraging the governance through social influence. You may have support sometimes, and you can use that utility then to achieve an outcome, but a month from then, 2 months from then, you may not have the same case. So I think it comes down to also recognizing that things are going to change over time. You're not going to be able to nail things down very clearly. And that's what's going to lead to a lot of inconsistency. But if you're able to maintain that social consensus, you can call on that utility at use whenever you need it, as long as you've got that alignment still.
For me, this was a really constructive conversation. This is a school of thought, of DAO thought that I don't interact with often. I really like that they've distilled, this school of thought has distilled all the DAO theory down to this extremely potent little drop, which is extremely powerful. And I see how everything can revolve around a reputation that is ledgerless and reputation that kind of exceeds the boundaries of a single community and is cross-community reputation without the requirement of any means of actually recording it. I think we should always keep this school of thought in mind, whatever we're building, because vibing is one of the most important ingredients. I learned a lot, man. Thank you so much for putting the time. Thank you so much. I know you have another spaces which I'm going to be listening on later on. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Dean Machine. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think we overly focus on some of the tooling stuff, and the nitty gritty around quorums, and it's nice to think about just this base layer. Forget about how we protect value when we get there, but how do we identify each other now that we can do these things outside of our physical location? I think that's a great thought, and something that I would love to help magnify. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this.
No, thank you guys. And I think it really comes down to this world isn't just on-chain activities. You need to have solutions both for the on-chain and off-chain activities, because anything off-chain can impact your on-chain actions. If I can prevent someone from voting by ostracizing them off-chain and getting them to leave the community, that's asserting governance influence. I didn't need tokens to do it. And so when we're looking at governance, we need to look, I think, broader at how we interact to then use these tools on-chain. So we need off-chain solutions for off-chain problems and on-chain solutions for on-chain problems.